some guy was just randomly out doing some mushroom hunting and stumbled across, her sweatshirt. And we knew very early on when this got relayed to us that, hey, there were some skeletal remains found out here in Greene County. There was a NHTSA hooded sweatshirt that was found with the bones, and Cheryl worked for NHTSA at the time. I was about 99.9% sure it was her. It wasn't uncommon for me to drink like 2 sleeves of Fireball and a 12-pack of beer in a night. My mind was constantly just going 1,000 miles an hour, and I was always drinking to try to calm it down.
This case puts you in the center of one of the most intense national spotlights, especially a local spotlight. I mean, just from the heightened intensity around it and the involvement with the news and national media, I know it's tough and we're going to talk about it, but how did you first become involved in the disappearance of Cheryl Coker?
Well, what's crazy is I wasn't even on call that night. My wife, through a friend of a friend, the report was made the early morning hours of October 3rd, and that there was a woman had gone missing.
What year was that in?
2018.
2018.
So it actually did not come back to the detective section that day. We weren't advised. I personally was not advised of it. So I'm on my way home from work, and my wife calls me, and she didn't know the missing woman necessarily, but she knew a person who knew her. So she called me, and she was like, "Hey, what's going on with this missing lady?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "There's a missing woman in Riverside." And I'm like, "I haven't heard anything about this." Apparently it had been relayed to a different detective or whatever, but it never made its way to me. So I got a little bit curious, and I started making some phone calls, and lo and behold, that there was in fact a reported missing person. Now, in fairness to everybody, and you know this better than anybody, people get reported missing all the time.
Sure.
And 99.9 times they come home that day, or they're blowing off some steam or whatever. So just because a missing person comes across your desk doesn't necessarily mean that it's like going to become this huge investigation. But this one obviously did. So won't name any names, but there was a person on call who the on-call detective was at that time. And I called and advised that person of the situation, and that person pretty much told me, "What do you want me to do about it?" So I said, "Okay, that's the attitude that you're going to have. I'll investigate this case." So this wasn't even supposed to be my case. And, lucky for me, it became that. But I volunteered for it because I said, if said person's going to have that attitude, then I'm going to give this family the best investigation that they could possibly get.
I think you said it right, but you take a lot of calls, or at least, in my days, we took a lot of calls of adults missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, oftentimes they're found. Now, if it's a kid, it's a little bit different, right? Especially like, look, kid was supposed to be home at 6 o'clock from school. He usually gets dropped off at the bus. They didn't make it home. The school doesn't know where they're at. None of their friends know where they're at. Like, that's a completely different case than saying, you know what, my wife went to the grocery this morning and she hasn't came back yet. Well, what's she doing, right?
Yep.
Like, that's a completely different type of case. But it sounds like something was different about this when you start hearing about it. Like, was there something right off the bat that just seemed different about this missing person when you heard it than maybe some of the ones that you had dealt with in the past?
Yeah, a lot of times when you get the missing persons reports, it's either somebody that's got some sort of mental illness and they've maybe gone off their meds or something like that, unfortunately, or somebody who's battling a drug addiction or something like that. And people like that tend to kind of go off the grid, for a while and then come back. Or people who get in trouble with the law and they find themselves in jail and their family doesn't even realize that they're locked up in whatever county and whatever state. This was different though, because in talking to the family, I could tell within 90 seconds of talking to them that this person, that she wasn't on dope, she wasn't anybody that would ever get in trouble with the law, and she's definitely not a person that would leave her daughters for any amount of time and just go blow off steam. This is a person that stayed in constant contact with her family and friends, and I knew again within a minute or so that yeah, this lady being missing, this is going to be a serious investigation.
So how'd the initial call come in? Who called it in? Like, who made the report?
It was her sister. The missing woman's sister called at about midnight on October 3rd, 2018, and an officer came out, and I felt the officer did a pretty good job. I mean, he was. I think the red flags were going off in his mind right away, and he did a pretty thorough report and everything, and he asked all the right questions and everything, and he was talking to the family and stuff, and he knew before any of us knew. He knew something was off.
So this was midnight. The family calls it in. You guys take the report. What time was it when you start hearing about it from the detective section standpoint, and when you actually jumped in and start helping on the case?
About 5:30 the same day of October 3rd.
So about 5.5 hours later on. Or was it later in that afternoon?
Later that afternoon, 5:30 p.m. I should have specified.
Okay. So I think a big question for people, because like we said earlier, people think, well, I reported a missing, but they didn't do anything for hours, right? And unfortunately, when adults go missing, unless there's something that tells you there is maybe something a little more cynical to it, a lot of times there's going to be a little bit of a period where there's not a whole lot that happens. But I think the logical question for people is between midnight when that report was taken until sounds like you jumped into action the next day. I mean, there's quite a few hours that go by. Like, what was happening in that time period?
For me, not knowing about it from midnight until 5:30 p.m. Had I known about it the second I walked into work, it would have been being worked right away. But again, I don't want to necessarily fault anybody, because this isn't the most, I could get the red flags going off, but getting just a missing person who didn't come home one night is not necessarily the most groundbreaking thing that you've heard in law enforcement. I mean, it's those type of cases would come out often. It stuck with me because the things that would make her part of the statistics that are typically, like, you see this happen in these people, they weren't there with her. So that's why my senses were going off so quickly.
Now, it sounds like you kind of jumped in and took a little bit of charge to get things moving on this thing. If that wouldn't have happened, how long do you think it would have been before somebody really took it seriously and said, okay, maybe this is something different?
I think it probably would have been within a reasonable time period. Again, the department as a whole did not know about this. I'm not going to name any names, but one particular detective was advised of it, and I don't want to Monday morning quarterback that person. The only thing I can say is I wish that person would have advised me sooner, because I would have jumped on it a little bit earlier. At the time, I don't think that it really would have changed the outcome of anything, but it would have given us a few more hours to, those early hours in any investigation are crucial. I don't know how much of a difference it would have made, but I would have liked to have learned of what was going on a little bit sooner than I did.
Sure.
And that wasn't a problem for my department. That was something that I kind of took issue with one individual person.
Yeah. No, I've seen a lot of cases. I mean, I've handled a lot of missing person cases, when I was still in my law enforcement career, and looking at this one, I don't think the department handled it any differently than what most departments would handle it. And I want to be clear that I'm not trying to place any fault with them, and you're certainly not doing that either. But I think the general person, it's one of the misconceptions that people have is, well, we reported them missing. Like, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you call out the SWAT team? Like, that's just not what happens with a missing adult unless there's something else there that says, hey, this is a little bit darker. But in your mind, with red flags going off, when was the moment where this turned from a missing person to something you felt was a little bit darker?
That night, same night, October 3rd, and it was about 8:30 p.m. I was contacted by the family and said, "Hey, we've located her vehicle down the road from her house in the parking lot of bar called Clancy's Tavern." The family called and said, "Hey, we found her car, but she's not here." When I got there, and obviously the car is a crime scene at that point. Seeing certain things inside the car, seeing that like her Fitbit watch was still there. There was kind of like a go bag of her property was still in there. it didn't take a detective at that point to say something's really, really wrong now. So,
Yeah. So when you got that and the family calls like, hey, we found her car here at Clancy's, which is also a big Kroger parking lot that was still active at the time. What were the steps the department took then? Like, how'd your investigation kind of come together? Like the early, minutes and hours of that investigation. Take me through the process of what that looked like from a detective standpoint.
They were, all the detectives at the time, it's kind of a all hands on deck, and the PD for us was saying, the people that were in charge at the time were like, anything that you need, if you want us to call in, BCI, if you want us to call in the FBI or whatever, these things these people can partner up with us. So they were good about saying, they were taking it extremely serious. It was what can we do with cell phone, analysis? Who can we get in here the fastest to get in this woman's cell phone and things like that? And fortunately for me, the department gave me those contacts and stuff, and we got those people in pretty quick to start analyzing that data.
Now, at this point, are you still thinking that maybe she's been kidnapped, maybe she's missing, she's being held hostage somewhere? Or were you like, this person's lost her life? Like, what was going through your head at that point?
What was going through my head is it was something sinister, that it wasn't, she didn't, I had no inkling that she went off and just, disappeared into the wilderness or took her own life or anything like that. I thought this is her being missing is at the hands of somebody else.
Yeah. And at the time, sounds like your guys' head is like already down that route, but were there any initial suspects that people were telling you about? Or like, here's the deal. People will go years and years and they'll never say anything bad about somebody. And then as soon as something happens, like, oh, I knew that he was blah, 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 or I knew she was doing blank, blank, blank in her garage for 20 years. I knew it all along.
Yeah.
Usually isn't true. They just want to talk. But were some of those things happening at this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of people that were, trying to, point to, she was in this sort of lifestyle, or she was hanging out with these people or going to these places, or not that any of that. That was just information I was getting, or, you need to look at people within the family, or this guy that she may have, been talking to online, or this guy that she went out on a date with, because she was kind of separated at the time from her husband. So I think it was pretty common knowledge to the family and to friends that, even though they were still, technically married, they were, kind of dating and stuff like that. So there was a lot of different people that were being told to us to look into, which we obviously did.
Yeah. And at some point, did you guys start narrowing down who that pool of suspects was?
Yeah, absolutely. Like any other investigation, you have a person of interest, and you don't want to be narrow-minded and have tunnel vision or anything like that. But, we looked into everybody. We interviewed a ton of different people that were named to us as people that, could possibly have information about her and things like that. And, as far as, me personally goes, like, yeah, I had people, a person of interest or a couple persons of interest in my mind.
So how the investigation, how did it kind of start unfolding a little bit, and get to the point where you guys started really zeroing in? Like, was there any big piece of evidence that just jumped out and said, okay, here's our person, here's our gal, here's our guy, like, this is who we need to kind of go all in on?
It was more of like a process of elimination, I would say, because obviously you want to start, everybody gets the same, you're looking at everybody under the same microscope or whatever, but there was, there's certain people that you had to look a little bit closer at than others, and, getting everybody's timelines. And, there were guys that she allegedly had, maybe been talking to, or maybe had gone on a date or two with, or whatever, that gave us our timelines and their alibis and things like that. And some of these guys were not even in the state of Ohio at the time. And you just kind of knew that, okay, we can kind of weed these people out. And then, there were obviously timelines of other people inside the family that maybe didn't make as much sense, or they didn't necessarily have a solid alibi as to where he or she was at the time. So that process of elimination made it easier for us to say, these people are no longer persons of interest, but, this person or this person are now our main focus.
So we look at a funnel and it starts way up here and then eventually it gets down. Like when you were at a point in your investigation where you guys felt like you had like a good stride and were making really good progress, how many suspects did you have at that time?
We had one person in particular that we felt was our main person of interest.
Was there anything that like just stands out during the investigation, or was it just like the only person that you couldn't eliminate?
Only person we couldn't eliminate.
And I think that's a lot of people don't understand that. Like that's a big part of police work, right? Is like it's really, really hard to get evidence that can absolutely 100% put somebody under arrest or convict them. But it's not always that hard to eliminate everybody else around that person, right?
Right.
Whether it be pinging cell phone towers or somebody has an alibi that you can check up on, especially today with all the cameras that are out there and license plate readers and all the things that are out there. It's pretty easy to eliminate a lot of people right off the bat. It's just not always as easy to get to a place where you can charge somebody. And I want to be clear, nobody to this day has ever been charged with this case, correct?
That's correct. I want to reiterate the same thing. Nobody's been charged. I don't, again, the way I look at things is because the case is there's been no sort of closure with the case. There's people that are still obviously going to remain persons of interest or whatever, and that's just kind of where we're at right now.
Is it public knowledge who the public is it public knowledge who the person of interest is?
I believe so. I believe it's kind of come out and interviews that's been had with the local media and local media has done quite a few stories. I think that anybody would kind of deduce who the person of interest from a law enforcement perspective would be, but that person would in any type of situation where a spouse goes missing, that person's automatically going to be a person of interest is who's their spouse at the time, and unless that person can provide some sort of alibi as to where he or she was or some sort of timeline that can eliminate them, then they're going to remain a person of interest.
Yeah. So if I'm a guessing man and I've been around, I've watched the news stories and this, you've given some interviews on, I believe, Dateline, and this story was out there with some of the big television programs, right? And the one person that you guys have never been able to eliminate was the husband that she was split from, right?
That's correct. That's accurate.
And was there ever a time where you guys were just 100% confident that this is the guy? Or has there always been something just kind of missing that we couldn't bring all the pieces of the puzzle together to get it to a prosecution?
The way I would characterize it would be the things that we learned in our investigation and timelines that were told to us and lack of witnesses to be able to corroborate certain timelines and stuff is why we could never eliminate that particular person as our main person of interest. And the investigation will never really be closed technically until we figure out who did this to her. So that to still classify that person as a person of interest, there's no other way to go about it. That's what it has to be at this point.
Yeah. Were you guys able to sit down with him?
3 different times, yeah. Myself personally twice, and then a fellow detective who's now retired assisted with us too.
Now, did he come in on his own free will? Did he have an attorney?
No, he came on his own free will, and it was cooperative and sat down, and at no point did he ever get up and say, I'm done with this, and he was willing. Anytime that we wanted to do it, he, to his credit, he was willing to sit down and speak with us.
Now, when you guys were talking with him, what did he think had happened to Cheryl?
I believe his theory or hypothesis or whatever was that maybe she went out with the wrong person, or maybe began a relationship with the wrong person, and that person basically forcefully removed her and took her somewhere and did away with her. Was basically his theory.
Now, when you guys sat down with him, what were the emotions like? Did you get a feeling that he was really concerned or upset, or I watch shows all the time, and you and I have both interrogated so many people in our lives. usually within the first couple minutes, like, are the emotions this person displaying, are they legit? Are they putting on a show? Are they acting?
Yeah.
Are they acting appropriate with what they're being asked and the situation that they're involved in? Did you guys have any feelings early on, whether you thought the person was, being one, forthcoming with you, and two, in the right kind of emotional state based on what was happening?
Yeah, it's so hard, I would say there wasn't a whole lot of emotion there, but I'm not going to overly criticize anybody for that because people, I've learned, we all learn as we get older, people deal with things different ways. So I wouldn't say that there was like any type of over emotion. It was a lot more just matter of fact. You have questions and let me answer them to my best ability.
Okay, so I think everybody can kind of put their own theory in mind on who the police department was honed in a little bit based on kind of what we've been talking about. But I think one of the questions that I always saw out there, and I'll just ask it, right, is I followed the media. I followed the local news media. I followed the local Facebook groups, right, which were very, very brutal, by the way.
Yeah.
And the question I think is everybody else's mind is like, did you guys get to the point where you tried to press charges and bring charges to a prosecutor on her husband? Was he the ex-husband or the husband at the time? They were just separated.
Separated, husband at the time.
Okay. Did you guys present a case to the prosecutor's office to charge him?
We presented the case multiple times, and every time up until the end, it was basically what they classify as like marked for further investigation. So, not to go into a ton of details as to what any particular prosecutor would say, but the prosecutors would say, go do this, go do that, come back to us, and then we would do those things, and then it would, basically it was kind of like a checklist of, you go meet with them. I would say we probably met with them close to 7-8 times, if I had to guess. And each time it was, a lot of, several hours worth of discussions. And then at the conclusion, the prosecutor's office would typically say, get your notepad out and let's do A, B, C, D through G or whatever. And then let's come back and discuss this in, say, 2 more months. And then my fellow detectives and I would go out and do A through G, and then we would represent, and then there would be like another, A through G next time. So it was just constantly, and in the defense of the prosecution, it was, they want to, dot every I, cross every T. So we were trying to do that for them.
Sure. Now, the other issue kind of early on was Cheryl Coker, and you guys didn't find her right off the bat, right?
Correct.
So at what point was her body located?
Her body was located April 25th of 2020, kind of right smack dab in that whole COVID.
So just so we recap it, like this investigation started in 2018.
Correct.
Her body wasn't found for a couple years later.
That's right.
Right? And in the meantime, you guys were still presenting a case, right?
Yes.
And man, that's really hard. That's hard to get a case to go through when you don't have a body, although it happens.
Yep.
And typically when a case gets taken by a prosecutor when you don't have a body, it's usually because you're able to identify a crime scene. You're able to show that, like, hey, there was this big, massive blood crazed thing in the bedroom. They cleaned it up and they got the luminol out. You can show a violent scene, and then you can kind of put a timeline together on how things happened, or show drag marks into a car, or like whatever. Like, there's usually something that says we can say this person is no longer alive, right? But you guys didn't have that in this case, right? Like, you never located an actual physical crime scene where something violent happened.
No, we treated the home like a crime scene. We treated her vehicle like a crime scene, but nothing of evidential value was found to say that Cheryl met her demise here or there. We have our theories in our heads where these things happen, but as far as anything tangible to prove that, we didn't have that, and we still don't have. I should say the police department. Prosecution still doesn't have that at this time.
So thinking through this, for a couple years almost, you guys are investigating this thing to your fullest ability. You're trying to get charges to go through. You develop in your mind who was probably responsible for, her not being here anymore. Not that we had a body at this point, but how was her body ultimately located? Where was it located? Take us through that.
So it was located on a Saturday night. I believe it was April 25th. Oddly enough, there was a guy out mushroom hunting out in Greene County, and from their address, I want to say it was like 19 miles away. But some guy was just randomly out doing some mushroom hunting and stumbled across, her sweatshirt. And we knew very early on when this got relayed to us that, hey, there were some skeletal remains found out here in Greene County. There was a NHTSA hooded sweatshirt that was found with the bones, and Cheryl worked for NHTSA at the time. So, obviously we had to get dental records and things like that to confirm that this was her remains, but we were extremely confident just based on the sweatshirt being still, and to be honest, the remains were mostly, I don't want to say intact, but we were able to locate a majority of the skeletal remains.
So while the general public didn't find out for quite some time, because obviously you have to be able to prove it and get all that, you guys knew pretty early on, like, this is Cheryl.
I was about 99.9% sure it was her.
Now, was it an area that was ever on your guys' radar? Like, wasn't a property that was in the family or somewhere that she had used to go hang out or anything?
No, her body was found like in a very small wood line, right off the side of the road, kind of in a rural area of Greene County.
Where were you at when you got the call?
We were moving. We'd actually moved from Riverside. The biggest reason that we moved was this case. It was just getting too much for us personally, for my wife, my daughters, and even myself. So we had actually moved from Riverside out to Bethel Township at the time, and I got the call while we were moving boxes in and stuff, and I had to stop what I was doing and tell my wife, hey, you're going to have to take over from here, and I was gone for quite some time after that. All
right, so take me back to when the call actually came in and this body was found. Like, where were you at? Where were you sitting? Were you with your family? Were you at dinner? Like, what was going on?
When the remains were found, we were in the process of moving. We moved from Riverside to Bethel primarily to get out of the city because of this case. It took its toll on our family. And we were moving boxes in and furniture and stuff like that. And I got the call that, hey, these remains were found out in Greene County. It's a lot of bones, and then it's wrapped in found with it is a black NHTSA sweatshirt. And again, common sense. We knew.
Yeah. Now, who was the initial agency? Was it Greene County Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, Greene County SO.
Now, did they have something that caused them to put a call in? Like, did they know that NHTSA was related to her? Like, how did it ultimately get to the point where they said, okay, we need to call Riverside?
Yeah, that ended up being a couple days later. And, whoever at the SO did a good job saying, hey, these are certain unsolved cases here in the area where people are still missing. Obviously Cheryl's being one of them, and you had the right people that, asked the right questions and reached out to us and said, hey, we need to let you guys know, this could possibly be your missing person.
Yeah. How long was it after that when these remains were found to where the public actually learned that, yes, this is Cheryl?
I believe it was within a day or so, maybe. So the remains were actually found on a Saturday. I actually didn't get notified of the remains being possibly her until like Monday. I want to say by Tuesday is when it was like general knowledge. So very end of April of 2020.
And how'd they confirm it? Was it through dental records? Or?
Dental records, yeah. I personally went and got the records as fast as I could, and then we were able to take them, and we got confirmation pretty quick.
Yeah. Now, when you're dealing with bones, and there's not much of an autopsy that can be done, but sometimes if it was, some type of trauma to the body, or, like a gunshot or a stabbing or something along those lines, usually the ME can find something that can tell you, like, maybe this was the cause of death. Like, was there anything like that?
Unfortunately, there wasn't. There was nothing to indicate that, as far as the skeletal remains that were found, which were most of them, there was nothing that indicated any type of signs of violence or anything like that. One of the other ways that we identified her was through a past surgery. I think she had some sort of something like in her spine from a past spinal surgery, and there was a certain marking on like the metal thing that they put in her spine that made us realize early on it was her too. But
surely. So at this point, like 100%, 1000%, Cheryl is no longer with us. Was there anything of evidentiary value that was collected from the scene that helped you get to a suspect or, help confirm what your guys' thoughts were?
Unfortunately not. Again, it was, the skeletal remains were a huge find because it could finally give first and foremost the family some closure, and then obviously, gave us more information. But as far as indicating as to the cause of death, we weren't able to make that indication.
Yeah. Now, when you have some of these types of cases, right, the general public comes out in droves, right? Like everybody's the best investigator. They all know how to solve the case, right? Like, why don't you just go to the bank that's a quarter mile down the road, pull the ATM footage, you'll see the passing car. And then after you do that, track back and type in, you want a Ford F-350 or whatever the hell the car is. And then you can get the VIN numbers and trace everything in Ohio and lead it back to one car, develop it from there. Like everybody thinks that it's easy.
Oh, yeah.
But what I think people maybe don't understand was this was a rural area where she was found, right? And in between where Riverside is and where this community is, it's not like some big metropolitan area where it's just loaded with cameras, loaded with flock systems that police departments use, especially at that time. What was the challenges of trying to, trace like maybe who dropped her off or where her car came from or how did she get there? Like, what were the challenges that you faced early on trying to figure that out?
So after her skeletal remains were found, the biggest challenge was the fact that, video retention. We're talking a year and a half later, going on 2 years later. Even if there was any type of video or anything like that, it's going to be gone. It's not going to exist anymore. And to add to what you said, with it being in a rural area, other than maybe checking like ODOT cameras and things like that, which I think we were out of the time period when it came to that anyways, but there just wasn't anything video wise. And, obviously you're going to knock on some doors and ask some questions and stuff, but it's hard to ask, a neighbor in the area, hey, did you happen to hear anything strange around the beginning of October 2018? You're asking them these questions
right, 2 years back
later. Yeah. So
was there a sense of relief with you guys that the body was located?
I felt terrible for the family because anytime there's a missing person like that, you always want to hold on to some sort of glimmer of hope. For me personally, yes, but I felt at the same time horrible because if they did have family members that were holding on to some sort of hope that maybe she would be found alive, your heart goes out to them. But from just me speaking personally, yeah, a lot of relief.
And did this change your guys' investigation at all? Like, did it help with the prosecution? Did it help with prosecutors wanting to take this case a little bit more? Like, how did that all evolve after her body was located?
Speaking on opinion, I always thought that if we had some sort of closure on like if her body was ever found, I always felt like this would get us that much closer to maybe making some progress with a potential prosecution. And obviously we met with the prosecutors multiple more times with that, but the answer was kind of the same, which was, nobody's being charged right now.
You're just not quite there.
Correct.
Do you think the prosecutors believed what your guys' theory was?
I don't want to speak for them. That's a tough question to answer, honestly.
Yeah.
I would think so, but then again, I mean, I don't really know what goes through their heads.
Sure. Was there ever I guess the biggest questions in my mind, was there ever like a motive that you guys had for why Cheryl disappeared and ultimately is not with us anymore?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of theories and motives that we, may believe, but we don't. We unfortunately at the time and still to this day can't really prove. I don't really know if I can go into a ton of detail about that, but definitely behind closed doors and with prosecutors and things like that, I think motives were definitely discussed. And in my opinion, what could be clear motives, but that may not be the opinion that others share.
Sure. So you carried this case with you for years, man, and still carry it today, I'm sure. What do you think the emotional highs and lows were that the general public never got to see behind the scenes as you guys were working this?
I can't really say there was a lot of emotional highs. It was a lot of lows. I don't want to turn this into a sad story because this story is, this is about her, not about me. But I am kind of, it's definitely had an effect. I don't want to sit here and boo-hoo about my situation because that would be extremely disrespectful to the family. But, as an investigator, just in general in these types of cases, there are definitely things that go on that the general public they don't quite understand.
Yeah. What do you think some of those are? Like, what do you think? Like, give me something that the public just always got wrong or misunderstood, and about the investigation, or like, was something out there that you saw that just really bothered you about something the public just misunderstood?
Yeah, one of the biggest things I would say is a lot of the criticism that I took personally was, why didn't you do a search warrant on her house the night that she disappeared? And, people don't understand the threshold that you have to meet for probable cause. I'm not an expert by any means, but you and I understand that. But a typical citizen does not have that same type of understanding. And that's a lot of flack that I took. And one of the biggest things was always, why didn't you dig up the above ground pool and look under the pool for her body and things like that? And it's like, well, where are you getting this? Why are you thinking that we don't live in a police state here? People still have rights to privacy, and the Fourth Amendment still holds up to this day. So you can't just go in and, without probable cause, flip somebody's house and their property upside down. And, the misconceptions that, certain idiots on the internet think they know this job, and they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue of a clue. So
yeah. And speaking online, I mean, it's not a secret that the city, the department, you guys took a lot of heat online, especially from the local community groups and their Facebook groups, if you will, right? Like, just a ton of heat. How do you think? And I know you said it's not about you, but I think the story is about you and everybody else that worked on this case, just as much as it is about the unfortunate situation with somebody losing their life, right? Like, it's not just one person that's affected. It's the family that's affected. It's the mom, the grandma, the aunt, the uncles, the kids, but it's also the police officers that work on this case day in and day out. And that's what they live every single day. That's what they take home to their families. And in my opinion, it's deeper than just the police officers. It's your family that has to deal with a father that is, I'm guessing, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I know with some of these types of cases that I've dealt with in the past, you become an absent father at times where you're not present for your wife, for your kids. At least that's my experience. Do you feel like that was some of the things that you went through?
Yeah. I was absent even when I was present, because I could be sitting there. We could be sitting there at dinner, or Texas Roadhouse or whatever, just having dinner. And like, I hate to say this, but people, my kids would be talking to me about something, and I'm sitting there looking and nodding my head and everything. But in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking about this case, and is there a different angle? We did some creative things that I really can't go into detail about. But I was always kind of in the back of my mind trying to think of what can we do that's outside of the box. I've worked some cases where I've done some really unorthodox things that maybe didn't sit well with a lot of people. And, I hope to talk about that one of these days, but my mind works a little bit differently. But my point with that is, I might be sitting there, with my kids having dinner, but I'm thinking the whole time, and just, what am I going to do tomorrow to try to get some sort of progress in this case?
Yeah. Do you think this case had some deep, long-lasting effects on you?
Yeah, I'll never be the same.
Change as a father, a man, a husband?
Yeah.
Like, the years that you worked on this, I'm just trying to, and I never had a case that was like this, right? Like, where there was this much scrutiny, this much spotlight, this much heat coming from a community. And like, were there times where you just felt completely isolated as a detective, like the weight of the world was on you and you only?
Yeah. Yeah. Probably one of the lowest moments I remember was, I brought up the St. Helens Festival earlier, and I'm going to bring it up again, different story. I went down there, and I would say probably 2019, I want to say. So it would have been the year after she disappeared, year before her remains were found. And there was a picture of me at the festival with some people, and somebody connected with the family of Cheryl, who I won't say who, but got on and kind of lashed out at, oh, look, the lead detectives, having a good time drinking at a festival right now. Meanwhile, who's looking for our family member? And at that, that was probably the first time that I got like genuinely like pissed off, because it's like, you don't know how much time I've spent on this case and how much time this case lives rent free in my head. If I want to go down and have a beer one night, don't bust my balls for something like that. You know what I mean? Don't give me a hard time. Don't try to paint the picture that I'm this lazy piece of shit detective because I had a Saturday night where I went out and had a beer with some people. That genuinely like pissed me off, and that's when I was like, you know what? I got to get out of this city. I got to move from here. I got to get my wife and my kids out of here. This is just becoming a little bit too much.
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine it being hard. I mean, you have a family that's wanting answers. You have a community that's demanding answers. You have national media that's watching. Like, how do you believe that you kept your humanity during this time?
I don't know. I didn't probably do a great job. I did a lot of, self-medicating and, living an unhealthy lifestyle and stuff like that. I was going to work. I was doing my job. I still think I was doing a great job because, unfortunately, this wasn't the only case that I still had to work on my other cases. And, Riverside is it may not be a large city as far as population goes, but it's high in crime. So I was very busy, and they would have to pull me off of Cheryl Coker a lot of times and put me on, this, that, or the other. And, it was, I was still going on and doing a good job, but I was going home and not doing a good job managing my life.
Yeah. During this time, when you look back, like as we sit here together and you have this case with Cheryl Coker, still nobody charged, still unanswered questions out there. I can only imagine that in your heart, you feel like who was responsible for it. But there's been no closure on the investigation side. Yes, there's been a closure that we know she's no longer with us. But as we talk about it, like what's the first emotion that comes up when you talk about the Cheryl Coker case?
Anger, just straight anger. Anger at the fact that for her family, and first and foremost them and her friends and things like that. But from a personal, I mean, people are naturally somewhat selfish, self-centered. I guess anger for myself and the other people who put good work into this case. Not blaming anybody or pointing any fingers, but you're pissed off that here we are 7 years later, and it just, like you said, there's no closure. So.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you this. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. It's kind of been on my mind. If Cheryl's family was listening to this right now, this podcast, what would you want them to know?
Not to listen to the people on Facebook, and not to listen to people who have no idea what they're talking about, and then just speak on, because they watch Blue Bloods or whatever idiotic shows on TV that's far-fetched or whatever, that we actually my former department did a good job with giving us all the tools that we needed. And I'm not a overly braggy person or anything like that, but I am a good detective, and or I was a good detective, I should say, and I did a very good, thorough investigation, and unfortunately, just certain things just don't always work out in your favor. So
yeah,
it wasn't for a lack of effort or incompetence or anything like that. We put together a good investigation.
Who were you before you put on the police badge?
Just a guy from Riverside, born and raised here. Went to Stebbins High School. My whole family, I'm third generation Riverside. So I was born in '83, 42 years old. Yesterday was my 42nd birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, man. I missed it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You feel older?
I do. Every year. Kind of a dark story. My on my grandma's side, there's been a ton of deaths at 42 years old, all through cardiac incidents. So this is a big year for me to kind of get myself back in shape and not be another family statistic. So, but no, man, I had a great childhood. My parents, they were, again, born and raised in the same city that I grew up in and later on would work in. They met in high school just like my wife and I did. They got married back in 1980, had me 3 years later, had my sister another 3 years later. And I had just an awesome childhood. Nothing to complain about. My parents were the best. They struggled, a lot financially early on. My dad worked at Borden's Dairy. My mother, she worked at St. Elizabeth Hospital in the X-ray department, and they struggled to do whatever they could do. But they gave my sister Tatum and I just a great life. And so went all through, grade school and everything. Got to Stebbins in '98. Wasn't the best student in the world. Was a little fat kid that wasn't good at sports. Didn't really have anything that made me stand out or anything. But my junior year in high school, I was able to meet my wife, Kim. We had actually gone to school together since 5th or 6th grade. Never even spoke to each other. Didn't even really. I knew who she was. I'm sure she didn't know who I was. But we started dating our junior year, and here we are 25 years later now, 2 daughters later, and that's the best way I can describe my early childhood, my early adulthood.
Yeah, it seems, kind of contrary to what my childhood was, not as bright and as shiny as what your parents were. But, there's lots of similarities there, right? Like we graduated from the same high school. We're from the same area. And my wife also is from Stebbins. Now, I didn't know her in high school. She was like the hot girl I had a crush on, but she ran with the thugs, man. She ran with the, little troublemakers in school. She was a chick that fought in school.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later in my law enforcement career that I ended up meeting her. And when I met her, it was like, oh, she's a sweet little girl. I'm like, do you know what she used to do in high school? She was mean.
Yeah.
But, lots of similarities, man. And, thinking back for you, if you look at your childhood, are there moments during your childhood that you think like shaped you into wanting to be a police officer? Was there any moments that you're like, man, this is why I'm going to do it?
Yeah, I had my dad's oldest brother. My dad's the second oldest of 6. He's got 4 brothers and a sister. His oldest brother, Steve, who I'm very close with to this day, he joined the Dayton Police Force back in '82. And unlike me, he was a guy that always knew. I didn't really know that I wanted to be a police officer till a little bit later on in life, where my dad's brother, I think he knew when he was 10 years old that that's what he was going to do. As soon as he graduated, he went straight into criminal justice and went through Sinclair and then got hired on at the Dayton Police Academy, graduated their police academy, and rose the ranks, and he didn't retire till 2015. So what was cool for me is he took me on ride-alongs, and I wouldn't say I was like fascinated necessarily with being a police officer, but I really admired him, and it was cool to brag about and go back and tell your friends all the crazy stuff you got to see on a ride-along, stuff like that. But I was a lot more interested in like owning my own business. That was my goal. Wasn't a great student. I knew that college was never going to be probably my biggest thing. Tried college for 2 weeks and actually got arrested on my way to college, which is a whole nother story.
Well, you can't leave it there. Like you got to tell us now, right? Like you brought it up.
Yeah. So, you probably went to the St. Helens Festival, I'm sure.
Sure, I have.
I'm sure maybe you dabbled in a couple old Milwaukee's when you were maybe under 21.
Never, because you know why? I always worked security at it. Even when I was a police officer, I always worked off duty at the festivals.
You know what? That's a good point because I actually remember seeing you there.
I never got to drink at the St. Helens Festival, but if I would have partake heavily.
Yeah. So we graduated June 2nd, 02. The festival was the following weekend. And like everybody else, it's Riverside tradition. You got to go to the festival. You got to go to the beer booth. And somebody gave me a wristband, so I was able to get in, basically sneak in. I looked like I was 12 years old, so I knew this wasn't going to really work out for me. But I sat back there, and I just got pretty shit-faced. And I'm walking out to go to the bathroom, and there's a Moonlight security guard at the the exit where you go to leave to go to the bathroom. And the guy stops me, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, man? You're not 21." And I throw up the wristband. I'm like, "Dude, I'm 21. Relax." And he follows me out, grabs me up, calls on his radio or whatever, and before you know it, a couple Riverside officers are there, and I'm a drunk 18-year-old kid running my mouth, being cocky, being a dick, and probably something that maybe I could have got away with, hey, let's get somebody here to pick you up and take you home, but I decided to run my mouth and be a cocky shit, basically. So I spent a night in the drunk tank, and anyways, I moved. They ended up releasing me, bonded out, I guess you would say. My wife bonded me out. They say that they sent the paperwork for my actual court appearance to the wrong address, because in the meantime, I briefly moved. Long story short, which was a long story, but I'm on my way to school at Sinclair on my second week there, and I'm working at a bank. I'm working at U.S. Bank in Oakwood, and I'm dressed up in my my nerdy bank teller clothes and stuff on my way to do my school day at Sinclair. I get into a little fender bender. A guy hits me. It was a snowy day. I get rear-ended, no big deal. And I'm noticing, I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and I'm like, well, the guy that hit me's been gone for like 20 minutes. What's up? Like, I didn't even do anything wrong. And before you know it, two Dayton dudes like rip my door open, and they're like, get out of the car. You got a warrant for your arrest. And I'm like, for what? What did I do? Well, come to find out, I was supposed to be in court for this whole underage consumption nonsense that I got myself in trouble to. But in my defense, I genuinely did not know I had court, because somebody signed for the summons, but it wasn't me. So I spent another full day down at the Montgomery County Jail, which sucked. For some reason, they set my bond sky high. It was like $10,000, like I assaulted somebody or something. But yeah, that's my story with going to college, and I think that was the last day I ever drove to Sinclair. So.
All right, so you get arrested on the warrant. You drop out of college, just taking some general ed. What do you do from there, man? Like, what year did you end up getting on the police department?
2011.
And what year was this when you dropped out of college?
2003.
Okay, so you got a few years there. What do you do in that meantime? Like, what it look like for the next several years?
I worked at I did a bunch of odd jobs. I was a pizza delivery driver. I worked for a mail service where I drove a truck. I worked at Kroger's, and then actually did have a good job. I worked at General Motors Truck and Bus in Moraine, and I was a temporary summer help there. And I was actually hoping to get on full time, but unfortunately that didn't really work out for me. So I got into the bank teller business, as exciting as that is.
So was there a trigger? Was there a moment where like police work became like, this is what I'm going to do? Like, was there something that happened, or did you just kind of fall into it?
I fell into it. Shortly after my wife and I got married and had our first daughter, I started working at a medical staffing company, and the company I was working for was having me do some stuff that was pretty basic. I mean, I felt like it was easy work, and I was doing a lot of recruiting and headhunting, and I was getting paid very little money. But I saw the checks coming in, and I realized, well, why don't I just do this for myself? So I quit pretty much on the spot. I didn't tell my wife, which probably didn't work out real well. But I came home one day and I said, I quit my job. I'm going to take what I've learned at the staffing agency, and I'm going to get a small loan, and I'm going to start my own business. I was fortunate enough that did work out. It worked out pretty good for a few years. By about year 5 is when the economy around 2009 really started taking a dump, and my business wasn't working anymore. So at that point, I had 3 options. It was either police academy, fire academy, or military, because I didn't really have any other skills. I didn't know what else to do. I ended up joining the police academy because at the time my uncle was an officer, and then my brother-in-law, Nick Toscani, who you know, he was a police officer as well. So I ended up going that route, and I went to Sinclair's Academy.
So you get out of the academy, and a lot of people don't understand this, but like in the state of Ohio, it's a little bit different. Like we have some big cities and like the highway patrol that will pay you to put you in a police academy. But most of the police officers in the state like put themselves through their own police academy, and then they have to go out and get hired at a smaller police department, right? And
Correct.
You know, that could be anywhere from 10 officers or to 50 officers, but most of the police departments around this area, they don't just throw you in a police academy. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, because in a lot of areas around our country, that does happen, right? Like
Correct.
Departments hire them and then they send them through. So you put yourself through the police academy, you get hired on Riverside Police Department. I'm sure family was there, and it's a very proud moment for you guys and your family and your wife. What did the first few years for you look like in the uniform?
The first few years were great. I will say my field training program was very rough. I had 3 FTOs, one of which ended up becoming my best friend. I was a rough trainee. I didn't have the military background. I didn't have the security background or anything like that. So I was so green to the job that it was really hard for me I wasn't getting it, and I was actually very, very close to being probationary released, because in your first year there, I mean, you're not part of the union yet, so they can release you for anything. And I was very, very close to being let go. Luckily, I had a field training officer, Mike Brewer, who ended up becoming a great friend of mine. He really helped work out a lot of the issues that I was having, the shyness and just the cluelessness overall. So I got through that. My FTOs typically take about 3 months. Mine actually took about 4.5, 5 months, so a little bit longer than everybody else. But at that point, I realized, this is what I signed up for. I'm making good money. I got to figure this out, and I worked very, very hard. Just going through my academy notebooks, and at night when my wife and kids were asleep and everything, I'd just sit up and read and do my very best to be the best officer I could be. And I was on the road for 5.5 years, and I absolutely loved it.
So when you first got on, was there anything that like really surprised you when you first started that was different than what you thought you were getting into?
Paperwork.
Yeah.
Paperwork was the worst part. They always say you have, 2 minutes of fun and 2 hours of paperwork.
Yeah.
And
I think for a lot of people that's normal, right? Like they watch Cops and it's like segment to segment to segment, arrest to arrest. Man, they don't see the hours, right? Like you do a DUI, what do you do? 2.5 hours of paperwork. Then you got court 3 or 4 times. You got motion to suppress. Like a lot of people don't see those things behind the scenes. And I think that'd probably be a common answer for a lot of police officers, right? Like I know that's what surprised me when I first got on. I was like, what do you mean I got like these 12 carbon copy documents that we gotta, that we have to bang out?
Yep.
Do you remember a time like early on, like those first 5 years, was there a moment, and I think we all evolve, right? No matter what career we're in, we all evolve and we go through different stages of our life as we are in a career. Was there anything like that first 5 years that you say like, this was the moment that like really started to change me, whether positive or negative? Was there anything that happened early on where you saw yourself change as a person, as a police officer?
Yeah. Probably by about year 4 or so, I think I was starting to get the reputation for being proactive, and I like to, the way our department was set up where you investigated all of the misdemeanors yourself, but felonies, you just took the basic report and then you shipped it off to the DIC section, and then they would obviously take it over from there. And I had aspirations early on to being a detective, so I kind of wanted to go a little bit above and beyond on some of the cases that I would get. So I got a burglary one night. It's a long story, but I'll condense it. Basically, a house got broken into, a bunch of gaming, Xbox and all the games and stuff got stolen, and kind of went above and beyond that night and did a lot of the work that the detectives would have ended up doing the next day. I was able to find the guy, get him in custody, and make the arrests and stuff, and made their jobs a lot easier. And the detective sergeant at the time wrote me an accommodation, and told me how much he appreciated everything, and basically that I'm paraphrasing, but this is what's going to make you a good detective someday. And that kind of lit a fire under my ass and made me realize, this is what I want to do. I like being a police officer, but I want to be a detective, and getting that accommodation and kind of being recognized just gave me that much more motivation.
Sure. Most people that have never been in law enforcement, they don't really understand what the day-to-day reality of police work looks like what happens every single day when police officers come in. And if you're thinking about that now, what do you think the public gets most wrong about police work? Or what do you think that like the biggest misconception is out there with what people think that happens day to day with police officers and what actually occurs?
I would probably say the misconception is that they think police officers are just out there, stopping people constantly, violating rights, just nonstop. And they're this, they're the aggressive, males and females of the world that want to go out and just, kick ass and everything when in all reality, and I'm not saying this about my former department by any means, I'm just talking in general, but most police officers are probably more, they don't want to do a whole lot. They just kind of want to, you have some that come and are very proactive and everything, but you also have a lot of people that come to work every day and just hope to sit in their car, not do a whole lot, and just beg to not be called on the radio. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there, that we all go to work every day and it's just, depending on what shift you work, I work 12-hour shifts, 12 hours of just nonstop chasing people, stopping cars, putting people at gunpoint, stuff like that. When in all reality, I think a lot of people just want to go there, make the 12 hours go by and go right back home to their family and just take as little reports as they can.
So at some point you transition into the detective section. There's a lot more responsibility. And for some, the detective section can be a little boring at times, right? Especially when you're in a small community. I mean, you might handle 37 cars that were broken into overnight and they give you all 37 case files. Like, well, shit, I'm never going to find the guy that did this or whatever. But there is a lot more responsibility that comes along with being a detective. So like, at what point did you transition and what really made you transition into the detective section?
The biggest thing, so I had a sergeant for the majority of my career, Rhett Close. He's now with the FBI, a great guy, a good friend of mine. He ended up getting promoted to the major over the detective section. And, he approached me and said, hey, we're going to have a couple openings. You should really put your name in and try to go in there and do well in the interview. I think you'd be good at this. So, I thought about it. I talked it over with my wife. I was really, really happy at the time. I loved being a patrolman. I was very proactive. And I was doing great in life, but I did take his advice. I ended up going through the whole process, going through the interview, and then they made myself a detective, and then my best friend at the time, Kyle Seward, and they put us both in there together. And that's kind of what led me there was working for my supervisor who got promoted.
Yeah. Were there any cases early on or a type of case that like you learned very quickly when you joined the detective section that just hit you a little bit harder or hit you differently?
I will say, I think, I don't have the statistics right now to say this, but child sex offenses are a major problem everywhere. But for some reason, the city of Riverside, it seems to be a bigger problem maybe in our city than there is others. You go to a place called Care House when you do forensic interviews of children, and the caseworkers and stuff there through the CSB, they'll tell you that Riverside is probably up there among the highest cities in those types of crimes. And I wasn't expecting that when I got into the unit, but that was a huge part of my job.
All right, so as a detective, you tend to carry cases home with you a lot. Like I know that from personal experience. I'd imagine it wasn't a whole lot different from you, but when you carry those home with you, like how heavy is that on you? Like how heavy is the weight at home and with your family and your friends and even some of them that you can't talk about some of the cases at times?
Right. It was a little more difficult for me, I would say, than the average person because I was investigating some of the crimes that were, getting out on social media and even in the news, the local news and stuff like that. And a lot of people in the community, not that I was this big popular guy because I wasn't, but again, I'm third generation Riverside. So everybody knows either of me, of my sister, of my wife. My kids were in school at the time, but primarily my family, my parents and all my aunts and uncles and stuff like that. So I always had this drive in me to be the best that I could because it's harder to work in the city that you grew up in because there's more of an expectation. And if you fail, you're going to hear about it a whole lot more from everybody else.
Sure.
And I took that home with me. And, the insecurities of, again, early in my career, I was very, very close to being probationary release because I just was having a difficult time acclimating to the job. So I always had that, I guess, insecurity about me and low self-esteem that like, hey, you're not doing good enough. Your case closure rate has to be better. Your conviction rate has to be better. So that was always my drive, and that would drive me literally crazy at night when I went to bed.
So part of kind of what you do, right, is like the craziest and worst moments of people's lives as a detective, especially, that becomes your everyday reality, right? Like that
Yes.
is what you deal with every day. And while most people have maybe one crazy thing happens to them every so often, as a detective and in law enforcement, you have just case after situation, like bang, bang, bang. How do you keep doing your job when that is your reality?
The best thing the way I looked at it was this is what you signed up for. I mean, and that's easy to say, but that's the only way I could kind of compartmentalize it in my head, was just to say, if I don't do this, somebody else is going to have to do it. So I better do as good a job as I possibly can. Um, I just had to get used to bad crime scenes and having to see things on the internet that no human being should ever have to see. But basically the way what I told myself was, if I don't do this, somebody else is going to have to do it. So man up and do the best you can with it.
Yeah, listen, Travis, you've lived a career that has taken a toll on you that most people can never even begin to understand. And I know that, and I know it personally. But as you moved kind of away from this investigation a little bit and tried to get things back to normal while you're still working in the police department, was there a breaking point? Was there a time where things just were bottled up too much, or too much weight on you? Like what that look like? Because you've mentioned it, but we haven't talked about it. Like, you're no longer at the police department. Talk us through that.
Yeah, back in 2020, I around the time Cheryl was actually found, within a few days actually, is when I got my first panic attack. I'd heard about panic disorder and things like that, but I had never experienced anything like that. It was just something that I watched The Sopranos, and Tony Soprano used to have panic attacks, and that was about the extent of what I ever knew about that disorder. And it was a Saturday afternoon. It was April 12th, and I was outside, and I came inside to use the bathroom, and my face was just beet red, and I felt like I was having a heart attack. I mean, I was convinced I was having a heart attack, and my wife looked at me. She knew something was wrong, and she immediately was like, what's going on? And I was like, yeah, run me to the hospital. So to speed the story up, she rushed me to Soin. I was like clutching at my chest the whole time. They got me in, and because of COVID, they wouldn't let her or anybody else in the room with me. So I'm stuck in this ER room, and I'm by myself, and I'm like, here it is. I'm 36 years old, and I'm getting ready to kill over of a heart attack, because of stress and everything else in my life. But had a weird EKG at the time. They said, you're gonna have to get in and do some tests, because it's not showing that you had a heart attack, but it's showing that you may have had a heart attack already in the past. So we need to get in. So anyways, they did a bunch of tests on me. That was basically like a false EKG, I guess, is what the cardiologist made it out like. He's like, your heart's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. So whatever you're suffering from is, it's not cardiac related. It's not really anything that we can find physical. And I'm like, all right, I should be fine. Maybe this is just an isolated incident. But I kept having panic attacks over and over and over. And to this day, I had one last night. It's just, last night my daughters came over to help celebrate my birthday, and just snap of a finger, I'm fine. And then 1 minute, I'm dizzy. I've got chest pains, and I'm feeling like, I'm getting ready to just bust out of my skin, basically. And I've had to deal with that ever since April of 2020, and I'm still dealing with it to this day. And that led to me no longer being a police officer.
Yeah. Now, when you talk to a lot of former police officers, a lot of the issues that pop up that I've heard from a lot of people that I've been friends with and who have left the department in similar situations, the one thing they say kills them all the time, and I know it to be true, is the silence after you leave the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not a job I wanted to leave. I didn't. I thought I wanted to still be in this line of work. I was good at it, But yeah, it just got to the point where, one of my fellow detectives he's been with me when I've had these attacks. I've been rushed to the hospital at work before, and I kind of in the back of my mind I always wanted to try to convince myself that I could fight it off and everything, but in the back of my mind I always knew like this is going to potentially lead to your downfall as far as your career in law enforcement. And I left the detective section, and I only worked back on patrol for maybe 3.5 shifts. And they kind of retrained me and stuff because things are so much different with technology now. But I made a traffic stop, and every day, I hate to use the word routine, but I made a routine traffic stop. A guy stopped for a number of violations and ended up having a license or whatever, cooperative, no issues. But I walked up to the driver's side, and I just had a full, my heart went from, probably 60 beats a minute to 180 beats a minute. And again, I just felt like that overwhelming, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack again. And I got real dizzy and stuff. And that was it for me. I ended up writing the guy a ticket and got through it the best I could. Got with my supervisor right after, and I said, I got to come off the road. I can't handle these attacks right now. And unfortunately, that was the last day I worked, and that was back in October of 2024.
Do you think that moment where you had to admit that to your supervisor was harder than actually dealing with it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
look, we are built not only as men, but as police officers to be the tough guys, the strong dudes, the one that's going to run into the fires and help people that are having the worst day of their lives. And man, it's so many police officers struggle with being honest about their mental health and the conditions that they're dealing with and the struggles that they're going through. I mean, was that kind of where you were at?
It was extremely difficult. I'm not really that type of vulnerable person outside of, my wife, my kids, and my parents. That's about the only people that I would, talk about that type of stuff with. But it was difficult to do that. And what was more difficult is you see people that you worked with for, the better part of 14 years suddenly questioning your character. And, people are cynical, and their first thing is, to have doubts about whatever. So when you hear the term, panic disorder or anxiety, when you blow your knee out or your shoulder out or something like that, that's something tangible that they can look at and say like, okay, this guy just had surgery. I get why he's off work. But when it's something involving mental health and something involving, I still don't understand panic disorder at all. I've seen a gazillion doctors, and nobody's really ever been able to explain to me exactly why I get these things, and they happen to me so frequently. But it's really tough when people that you considered friends and, you worked beside and went on crazy calls with for all these years are suddenly like, questioning your character. And, I'd always looked at it like these people that truly know me would know that I'm not the type of person to just, say, oh, I'm having panic attacks because I don't want to come to work anymore. I love that job and I was good at it, but I can't do it anymore,
Yeah.
So that's been tough for me, and that's been tough for my family to have to deal with too.
Well, it's always amazed me how quickly fellow police officers and supervisors or people that you knew for so many years, how quickly they turn their back on you.
Some are great, and I don't, good chunk of my department, I'm still former department, I should say, I still talk with on a regular basis. But it's not just even in the department, it's just other officers in general. Some are supportive and then some are not.
Sure.
And you just hope that the people that know you well enough, everybody says, oh, who cares what people think about you? Well, unfortunately I do. I can't help it.
We all do to some extent.
Yeah, I think so.
But now I'm going to move on to a topic that is probably a little more sensitive, but you've been open with me about, using alcohol to kind of cope a little bit through these things. And I guess really the first question is, when the alcohol use started, was it a slow slide, or was there a moment where you were like, oh my God, like I'm drinking too much, or what? Like how'd that happen with you, Travis?
And it was, I didn't really have any issues with alcohol at all while I was on the patrol side of things. It really came up and surfaced when I became a detective. It wasn't, and my wife would say like, I'd get home from a stressful day and I would crack a beer and she'd be like, that's not like you. Why are you drinking on Monday night for? And she would kind of warn me like, hey, this is going going to be a slippery slope for you if this is what you come home and do. And she was right, because it started with, coming home and having 3 or 4, and then a year later it was, 6 or 10, and a year after that it was like 10 to 12, and before you know it, I'm drinking, it wasn't uncommon for me to drink like 2 sleeves of Fireball and a 12-pack of beer in a night.
Yeah.
And when I say the sleeves of Fireball, you get like the little 10 packs at the liquor store or whatever. I would drink, the little individual shooters, I would drink 20, 25 of them in a night, just constant, one after another, and then drinking beer on top of that. And I was drinking to blackout every single time I drank. And it just got progressively worse.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, like none of this, it wasn't like you had a drinking problem while you're on duty or, or
No.
while you're working. But when you came home after, a shitty day, which during these couple years, I'm sure there was a lot of shitty days. What I'm surmising is like just kind of numb the thoughts of the day and the feelings of the day. But is that kind of what was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. The Cheryl case was really tough, and I would say I probably used alcohol as a way to shut my brain off at night, because it never, you're constantly thinking about the next day and what you're going to do, and then all your other cases and stuff. But which I really haven't touched on, is 2020, there was a massive uptick in child internet sex stuff. So that stuff went absolutely wild, and people had way too much free time on their hands, and these sick people that were already looking at things like that were doing it at such a larger scale. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Somebody has to do this job, and I was unfortunately a person that had to do a lot of these, child SA cases on the internet, and these things that I had to see, and it's not just me; it's anybody that's had to work these types of cases. And there's cases I'd have to look through hundreds and thousands of videos and take them to a doctor, and a doctor would have to, do their, figure out ages and things like that, and then turn around and go to a grand jury. And so, yeah, I think that was another really, really huge contributing factor as well.
Sure, I get it. I mean, look, I hated dealing with those types of cases. It just takes a different toll on you. But where we're at now is you're no longer at the police department. The case is behind you, but the memories and the traumas are still there. But has there been a moment that was like your rock bottom?
Oh yeah.
What'd that look like for you?
July of 2023. My wife and daughters went to the country concert out in where they do it every year around here.
Sure.
And I was out doing some stuff in my yard, painting some furniture of all things. And I was trying to get off a Fireball, because that's what I drank. That's all I drank, was so much of it. So I thought a good idea would be go get some like Tito's and Gatorade. So I did for the first few drinks. I was just making like a double Gatorade and vodka. And I like that instant gratification of like a shot, and I wasn't getting that. So I'd go in to make my third drink, and I did a shot, and I was like, I'll do 2. Made another double, did 2 more, back in. I wasn't trying to get, effed up or anything like that. It was just one of those things where my mind was constantly just going 1,000 miles an hour, and I was always drinking to try to calm it down. Long story short, I ended up drinking like a handle of Tito's in probably about a span of 2.5 hours. And
Tito's look, vodka's like the slow creeper.
Yeah.
You think nothing's going on,
mm-hmm.
and then you stand up out of the pool and you can't walk.
Right. Yep. And that's what I did. And again, I wasn't trying to get, screwed up or anything. It was just, that's just how I drank. I was a binge drinker. And, I collapsed. I had somebody over at my house who was present. That person called my wife and was like, a family member called my wife and was like, hey, he's not doing good. You need to get over here right away. And by the time she rushed to get there or whatever, I was like foaming at the mouth, and they were like, what do we do? Do we call we call an ambulance, or what do we do? Because if their thing was like, well, if he goes to the hospital, how's this going to affect what's going to happen to him at work. You know, if they
Right.
know that he's going into the hospital for alcohol poisoning, is there going to be some sort of ramifications? So luckily they were able to kind of get me back a little bit coherent or whatever. That was probably my biggest rock bottom. I actually was able to go a little while without drinking, not a really long time, but a little while. But at that point I swore off liquor. I was like, I'll never drink liquor again. So I'll just drink beer, you know, that way I'll never get that screwed up again, which was fine at first. But then I went from drinking like 12, 15 beers to, you know, 24, 25, 28 beers a night and people think that's an exaggeration, but I was doing that every single night I drank. I was drinking over a case of beer. And, you know, that's going to get you as effed up as drinking liquor if you
Sure.
drink enough of it. So, but yeah, I'm several weeks sober now. The last time that I drank was during the Bengals Broncos Monday Night Football game 9 weeks ago. And that was kind of another rock bottom. You know, I was the type of person that would get so blackout drunk that, you know, you up in the middle of the night, you got to take a leak somewhere. You end up not even realizing that you're doing. You take a leak in your closet or in the corner.
That sounds familiar. I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah. So,
And just so you know, it's not just alcohol. Like I'm gonna be vulnerable for a second. I had a dream the other night that I was on the back porch of my trailer, peeing in the wind. You know, like in the dream, everything was like splashing back on me. I'm like, well, there's like, why is this coming back on me? And then I wake myself up and realize I was peeing on myself.
yeah.
It never happened to me before, but I wasn't drunk.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that game that night, like, what was going through your mind? Like, you're sober now, so what triggered you to like kick it? Like, what is that? What's that look like for you?
I don't know. I still was, you know, talking to, you know, a lot of people on the phone from work, and you know, you're still hearing stories of, you know, the aggravation of the Cincinnati Bengals. By the way, I'm a huge Bengals fan, but
well, they're enough to make you want to drink anyway.
Right?
Me
Yeah,
too.
it's rough. But you know, talking on the phone to people and still hearing, you know, little whispers of, you know, this person doesn't understand. You know, says that you just need to suck it up and come back to work and quit doing this and stuff. And that frustration, it's like, this person doesn't know what I'm going through. This person doesn't know what a debilitating thing I'm going through. And, you know, again, you get mad about it. And the way I deal with strong emotions is to drink. And that's just what I did. And I got into a vicious cycle that, you know, was not helping with the panic disorder too. That I still, you know, I deal with the panic disorder whether I drank or I'm sober. The only thing about drinking is it would kind of pause it for a little bit, because if I was drunk, it would, you know, it would put a little Band-Aid on it. But then as soon as I woke up the next day hungover, then the panic attacks would come right back. So I still deal with those, but I just don't have to deal with the effects of, you know, being hungover and being a drunk idiot all the time. So
yeah. Well, one, congratulations on your sobriety, man, and
Appreciate it.
And hopefully, I know it's a long road for most, and hopefully you can stay there. But what does healing look like for you in your mind right now? Like today, as we sit here, what's that look like?
the biggest thing probably is, you know, I got to get myself physically back in order. You know, the drinking and I gained about 100 pounds from the time I became a detective until the time I walked out the door. When I became a detective, I was about 170 pounds. I was lean. I was in good shape, and I walked out the door at probably right at about 260, so about 90 pounds. I'm since down about 20 since leaving the department, and I'm actually at this point I'm working out like crazy every day. It went from 45 minutes to I'm getting in better shape, and then 45 minutes went to 60. Now I'm working out about an hour and a half every day, and I got a lot of weight to lose. But that's kind of my therapeutic thing that I do every day. Is, you know, it's simple. I got free weights in my basement, and I got a treadmill, and I just bust my butt every day, and kind of punish myself a little bit maybe for letting myself get to this point, because I used to be a thin guy and everything, and now I'm kind of a fat slob. So it's you know, taking some punishment out on myself. But it starts with physically, and then being, you know, the best I can be to my wife and kids. You know, it's unfortunate, but my kids saw me intoxicated a lot, and I got a lot of I always felt like I was still a good dad, even though maybe I drank too much. And my kids will tell you like, yeah, you know, you got carried away with alcohol, but you weren't mean or abusive, or, you know, you're always, you know, you're a good father, but you're a better version of that now. So
Yeah.
that's what healing looks like for me.
You know, I know when I've been through some, you know, dark moments in my life, and during those times, I was always trying to find stuff that brought me peace, right? And that's what always helped me get out. Is there anything in your life right now that just stands out? Like, okay, these are my moments of peace. This is what makes me feel normal and feel okay.
Probably, probably just more being with my family and actually being present right now, and not either, you know, having like the work on your mind, or being, you know, shit faced drunk, and being present with them and stuff, and waking up and feeling good, and going to bed feeling good, and actually spending that quality time with them. That's like my happiness. You know, like last night, when you're a detective, as you know, you're always on call. It doesn't matter if it's the weekend or a holiday or whatever, you're always on call. And like last night was cool because it was snowing. It was like one of those, we kind of live out in the country and stuff, and you know, we have a nice view, and you see like the snow coming down, and you're like, I can spend this time with my family tonight and go to bed, and I don't have to worry about my phone ringing. I don't have to worry about, you know, getting called into work for who knows what all of a sudden. And, you know, it's just kind of like a peaceful thing. And then, you know, being clear minded at the same time was a combination of like things are trending in the right direction too.
Sure. So I'd ask you, like, you know, I typically ask somebody like when you're looking at your younger self, but this is a little bit different. There's lots of young boys and young girls out there that dream of being a police officer, that dream of being a cop. And if you could give them like one, you know, piece of advice or something that you would tell them for all those young people out there dreaming of entering law enforcement, what would you say to them?
Probably the two biggest things I would say is, understand the job first and foremost. I mean, there's a lot of people, you know, you got to really get your nose into the ORC, and learn this job. There's a lot of great officers out there that will attest to that, but really know what you're doing. Don't ever rely on, you know, having to have other people help you along the way, and take care of yourself physically. That's something that I haven't done. I mean, I've just touched on, I gained a lot of weight. A good police officer is somebody who is, you know, physically fit, and, you know, able to do the job at the highest capacity at all time, and stay away from, you know, it's cliche, but, you know, stay away from the alcohol, things that plague law enforcement or law enforcement officers are, you know, guys and girls, I should say, they drink too much. You know, they do things that they shouldn't be doing. They run around, and they go through divorces and things like that. And you just become another statistic. You sit around, you eat fast food all the time, you get out of shape. And if you look at other people's stories and see that, like, you know, 75% of officers, this is what happens to them, before you go into it, you need to know that I could easily be one of these statistics. So if I get into it, I have to rewire my brain to make sure I never allow myself to get to that point.
Yeah. There's one thing that I know for sure, which is you're not rare. There are lots of Travises out there across this country, not just in law enforcement, but other fields that, you know, maybe feel like the career broke them or whatever. And if you were talking directly to those people because you've lived it, and now you're what I would call on your comeback, right? If you had a message for them, to people out there that are feeling lost or still wrapped up in addiction or something that is just keeping them down and living their fullest potential, what would your message be to those people, especially the police officers or first responders that feel like their career's broken them a little bit?
My biggest advice would be open up your Bible. That's what I've done. Religion was never really a big thing in my life. It became a big thing kind of when I have been at my lowest points here recently, and started to, you know, read a lot more about Jesus and the Gospels and things like that. And it's really helped me to become the person that I am. That's the biggest advice I would give. The second advice I would give is prioritize your family before everything else.
Yeah.
Regardless if you're police or whatever you do, make sure that your family's always top priority, and you're spending good quality time with them, and you're not, taking your job home with you. And when you're supposed to be spending time with them, talking on your phone, and going over what's going to be done the next day. So be present is something that I didn't always do. That's something I look forward to doing now.
Yeah, I love it, man. Your story could have ended in darkness, dude. And what I see now is a man sitting in front of me that's fighting his way back. And one, I'm proud of you for just being able to tell your story and to get back out there and start scraping to get back to the guy that that you are, right? And for me, the question would be is like, what does redemption look like for Travis?
Getting my life back together, as far as having some sort of, getting back physically on my feet, getting back, I've kind of been told by a few doctors that these panic attacks are probably something that, medicine can kind of help, but you're probably going to have to deal with. So figuring out a way to live a normal life, dealing with the fact that these are just, like I said, I had one last night just out of nowhere, no rhyme or reason to it. It just happened. So I got to be able to figure out a way to, minimize those or learn how to deal with them better. And, I really don't know what my purpose is yet to try to get better. I know that I'm doing it one step at a time, and the job took its toll on me and stuff like that. But I hope to, get to have conversations with people in the future. You do a lot of good advice giving. I've picked your brain and stuff, and you've helped me out tremendously. And I'd like to get to a point one day where I'm able to do that with other people.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm rooting for you. Even if you can't see me, even if you can't hear me, I'm cheering for you, and I'm proud of the steps that you've taken already. And I appreciate you being here and allowing me to share your story also. All right. Hey guys, if you liked this episode, well, even if you didn't like the episode, make sure you go down, you like it, share it out, and subscribe to the channel so that you get notified of all the upcoming footage that we have coming out, all of the podcasts, all of the shorts, and make sure you follow us because you want to follow us. We put out good stuff. But I do have a message today. It's a little bit different. If you're a first responder out there, if you're a police officer out there, and you're battling with something with addiction, something that is plaguing you down that you've had to deal with in your career, I want you to know that you're not by yourself. You just heard a story of a man who's dealt with it firsthand. And all of you need to know you're not alone. There are plenty of other people that are out there that are dealing with the same type of things that you're dealing with. You do not have to walk through life. You do not have to go through this journey by yourself. It doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't make you some big tough guy or tough gal. It's okay to not be okay. And you need to hear that message from me. What I'm going to do for this episode is I'm going to put Travis's information down the link below. If you need somebody to talk to, if you need somebody to reach out to that's going through maybe some of the same things that you are going through or went through some of those and just need a sounding board, I'm sure that Travis would be happy to talk with you. I'll put that down in the description. I'll also put the description down below with all of our books, all of our resources, how you reach out to me. And if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, we'd love to have you. If you have a great story, especially if it revolves around entrepreneurship or starting a business or some type of great comeback, we want to talk to you. So go down below. We'll have all that in the description. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.